Young millionaire let homeless girl stay overnight. The next morning he was shocked by what he saw. The rain pounded against the windshield like a relentless drumbeat, the rhythmic clatter muffled by the plush interior of Michael Turner's sleek black car. The world outside was a blur of dim streetlights and streaks of water running down the glass. New York City, bustling and alive by day, seemed like a ghost town under the storm's assault. Michael adjusted his grip on the steering wheel, his jaw tight as he maneuvered through the empty streets. The faint hum of classical music played from the car's sound system, but it did little to ease the gnawing sense of emptiness clawing at his chest. He had just left another networking gala, an event filled with hollow laughter and meaningless small talk, the kind of place he had learned to navigate with ease. Yet tonight, the usual satisfaction of closing deals and making connections felt distant, as if he were watching someone else play the role of Michael Turner, the young, self-made millionaire. As he stopped at a red light, his eyes wandered to the sidewalk. Beneath the flickering glow of a street lamp, a figure huddled under the awning of a boarded-up shop. It was a young woman, her thin frame wrapped in a tattered coat, her knees pulled to her chest. Wet strands of hair clung to her pale face, and her eyes stared blankly ahead, as if the storm outside had long since matched the one within her. Michael's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. He was no stranger to the sight of homelessness in the city. It was a harsh reality he'd learned to ignore over the years. Yet something about this girl rooted him in place. Perhaps it was her youth, or the way her shoulders trembled in the cold, or maybe it was the faint flicker of recognition he felt deep in his gut. The light turned green, and the car behind him honked impatiently. Michael pressed the gas, tearing his gaze away from the girl as his car surged forward. "Not my problem," he muttered to himself, trying to shake the image from his mind. He turned the music louder, but the haunting image of the girl refused to fade. A block later, he slammed on the brakes, his car skidding slightly on the wet pavement. His heart raced, not from fear, but from the war raging inside him. "Damn it," he hissed, shifting into reverse. Moments later, he was parked along the curb, stepping out into the icy rain. The cold bit through his tailored suit as he approached the girl. "Hey," he called out, his voice rougher than he intended. The girl flinched, her wide eyes snapping up to meet his. She looked like a cornered animal, her body tense and ready to flee. "I'm not here to hurt you," Michael said quickly, holding up his hands. "You're going to freeze out here. Do you have somewhere to go?" The girl hesitated, her lips trembling as she shook her head. "I'll be fine," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "No, you won't," Michael shot back, surprising even himself with the force of his words. He ran a hand through his damp hair, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Look, I'm not asking you to trust me, but you can't stay here. Come with me, just for the night." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flashing across her face. "Why would you care?" Michael hesitated, the question cutting deeper than he expected. Why did he care? He didn't know her anything. Yet, beneath the cynicism and the walls he'd built around himself, there was a memory, a younger version of himself, cold and desperate, searching for a lifeline. "I just do," he said finally. "Take it or leave it." The girl studied him for a long moment before finally nodding, her movements cautious. Michael shrugged off his coat, draping it over her shoulders as he led her to the car. Inside, the silence was heavy. She clutched the coat tightly, her body hunched as if she were bracing for an inevitable blow. Michael focused on the road, his mind racing with doubts. "What's your name?" he asked after a few minutes. "Emily," she said softly. "Well, Emily, you look like you could use a hot meal and a dry place to sleep. My place isn't far." Her eyes darted to him, searching for ulterior motives. "Why are you doing this?" Michael sighed, his grip on the wheel tightening. "Let's just say someone once helped me when I needed it most. Maybe it's time I pay it forward." They drove the rest of the way in silence, the sound of the rain filling the space between them. As they pulled up to Michael's sprawling townhouse, Emily's eyes widened, a mixture of awe and apprehension flickering across her face. "This is your house?" she asked, her voice laced with disbelief. "Yeah," Michael said, stepping out of the car. "Come on." He led her inside, the warmth of the house a stark contrast to the cold outside. Emily lingered near the door, her wet shoes leaving puddles on the marble floor. "You can take the couch," Michael said, grabbing a blanket from a nearby closet. "Bathroom's down the hall if you need it. I'll get you some dry clothes." Emily nodded, her expression unreadable as she took the blanket. "Thank you," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael paused, the sincerity in her tone catching him off guard. He gave her a small nod before retreating upstairs. As he lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd just set something in motion, something he couldn't yet understand. The house was eerily quiet, save for the faint ticking of a clock in the hallway. Michael stood in the kitchen, leaning against the marble countertop with a glass of bourbon in his hand. The warmth of the liquor did little to settle the unease gnawing at him. Through the archway he could see Emily on the couch, wrapped in the blanket he had given her. She sat stiffly, her back straight, as if any moment she might need to bolt. Michael observed her from a distance, his mind a whirlwind of questions. Who was she? What was her story? And why had he, someone who prided himself on being detached and pragmatic, brought her into his home? He took another sip, the bourbon burning down his throat. Michael Turner wasn't a man who trusted easily, or at all. Life had taught him that. Growing up in a rundown apartment in Brooklyn, he'd learned to rely on no one but himself. His father had walked out when he was 6, and his mother had struggled to keep food on the table. By the time he was 18, he was working 3 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. Success hadn't come easy, and it hadn't come without cost. Now, at 30, Michael was one of the youngest self-made millionaires in New York. He owned a tech company that had skyrocketed to fame, lived in a house that could grace the covers of architectural magazines, and attended galas where champagne flowed like water. But beneath the polished exterior was a man who had never truly shaken off the weight of his past. He turned his gaze back to Emily. She was staring at the fireplace, though it wasn't lit, her expression unreadable. Her hair, still damp from the rain, clung to her face, and the oversized blanket made her look even smaller than she already was. Michael cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "You hungry?" Emily looked up, startled, as if she'd forgotten he was there. She hesitated before nodding. "Wait here," he said, disappearing into the kitchen. A few minutes later he returned with a plate of leftover pasta. It wasn't much, but it was warm. He set it on the coffee table in front of her and stepped back, watching as she tentatively picked up the fork. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael nodded but didn't respond. Instead, he sank into an armchair across from her, his sharp eyes studying her every move. Emily ate slowly, her hands trembling slightly as she brought each forkful to her mouth. She looked fragile, almost breakable, but there was something in her eyes, something that didn't match the rest of her. They weren't the eyes of someone who had given up. "So," Michael began, his tone casual but his gaze piercing, "what's your story?" Emily paused mid-bite, her shoulders tensing. "What do you mean?" "You know what I mean. People don't just end up on the streets for no reason." She set the fork down, her hand brushing a strand of hair from her face. "It's a long story." "I've got time," Michael said, leaning back in his chair. Emily hesitated, her gaze darting to the floor. "I left home a year ago. My stepfather," she trailed off, her voice catching. "He wasn't a good man. And my mom, she chose him over me." Michael's jaw tightened, a flash of anger sparking in his chest. He'd heard stories like hers before, but they never failed to strike a nerve. "I thought I could make it on my own," Emily continued, her voice steady but hollow. "But it's harder than I thought. Jobs don't come easy when you don't have an address. And shelters," she shook her head. "They're not always safe." Michael remained silent, his thoughts spinning. Her words reminded him of nights he'd spent sleeping on a mattress on the floor, wondering if his life would ever amount to more than survival. "You don't trust me," Emily said suddenly, her eyes meeting his. Michael blinked, caught off guard. "What makes you say that? You keep watching me, like you're waiting for me to steal something." He let out a humorless laugh. "Can you blame me? I don't make a habit of bringing strangers into my home." Emily's lips curved into a faint, almost bitter smile. "Fair enough." She looked away, her gaze settling back on the dark fireplace. "I don't blame you. Most people don't even look at me, let alone help." Michael didn't know how to respond to that. The truth was, he didn't fully trust her. But something about her story, about her, resonated with a part of him he'd buried long ago. "Get some sleep," he said finally, standing and heading for the stairs. "The couch is yours for the night." Emily nodded, pulling the blanket tighter around her. As Michael climbed the stairs to his bedroom, he couldn't shake the image of her sitting there, small but unbroken. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar, a flicker of empathy, a nagging sense of responsibility. Lying in bed, he stared at the ceiling, his thoughts restless. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. But one thing was certain, the girl on his couch had already unsettled the carefully constructed world he lived in. That night, Michael lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep eluded him, his thoughts circling back to Emily. He couldn't shake the image of her sitting on his couch, clutching that mug of coffee, as if it were the only thing tethering her to the world. Eventually, he gave up trying to sleep and headed downstairs. The house was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamps outside. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, he paused. Emily was standing by the window, her silhouette outlined by the faint light. She was wrapped in the blanket, her arms hugging herself as she stared out into the night. Michael hesitated, not wanting to startle her, but something about the way she stood, so still, so quiet, compelled him to speak. "Couldn't sleep either?" he asked softly. Emily turned, her eyes glistening in the dim light. She quickly wiped her face, but not before Michael saw the tears streaking down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," he said, stepping closer. Michael rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly. Small talk wasn't his strong suit, but something about the girl's presence demanded acknowledgement. "Sleep on the couch, okay?" Emily shrugged, her gaze falling to the coffee table. "Better than the street." Michael nodded, unsure how to respond. He motioned toward the kitchen. "There's tea if you want." She hesitated before nodding. "Thank you." In the kitchen, Michael poured 2 cups of warm tea. He handed one to Emily and sat down in the armchair opposite her. The silence between them stretched, heavy but not entirely uncomfortable. So Michael began, breaking the quiet. "What's your plan?" Emily stared into her tea, her fingers tightening around the mug. "Plan? You can't stay on the streets forever. Don't you have anyone you can go to?" She shook her head, her voice flat. "No one." Michael studied her, the faint lines of exhaustion etched into her face. "What about work? Have you tried finding a job?" Emily let out a hollow laugh. "You think it's that easy? No one wants to hire someone who looks like me with no address and no clean clothes. I've tried." Her words stung in their honesty, and for a moment Michael was at a loss. He knew the world wasn't fair. He had fought tooth and nail to escape its merciless grip, but hearing it laid bare from someone else's perspective made it harder to ignore. "What about before?" he asked cautiously. "Before you ended up on the streets, what happened?" Emily's shoulders stiffened, her expression hardening. "Why do you care?" Michael frowned, caught off guard by the sharpness in her tone. "I'm just trying to understand." Emily stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his. Finally she exhaled, her posture relaxing ever so slightly. "I grew up in a small town in Pennsylvania," she began, her voice distant, as if she were speaking about someone else's life. "My mom was a waitress. She worked hard, but it was never enough. And then she met him." Michael didn't need to ask who him was. At first he seemed okay. He was nice to her, helped with bills. But it didn't take long for things to change. He started drinking, got mean. And when he got mean with me, she looked the other way. Emily's voice cracked and she paused to collect herself. Michael said nothing, his chest tightening as he listened. "I left when I was 17, she continued. "I thought I could make it on my own, but it's harder than I thought." The room was silent, the weight of her words settling between them. Michael took a sip of his tea, his mind racing. He could see echoes of himself in her story, different details, but the same struggle for survival. He remembered the nights he'd spent alone, wondering if anyone would ever care enough to help. "Why didn't you go back?" he asked softly. Emily's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because going back would mean admitting I failed. And I'd rather freeze out there than let them see me like this." Michael leaned back in his chair, her words hitting closer to home than he expected. He understood that pride, that stubborn refusal to give up even when the odds were stacked against you. "You're stronger than you think," he said quietly. Emily looked up, surprised by the sincerity in his tone. For a moment their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a shared understanding of pain, resilience, and the determination to keep going. "You're not stuck," he said firmly. "You're just in a bad place, and bad places don't last forever." Emily stared at him, her eyes searching his for any hint of insincerity. When she found none, her lips trembled, and a single tear slid down her cheek. "Thank you," she whispered. Michael nodded, his hand lingering for a moment before he stepped back. "Get some rest. Tomorrow's a new day." As he climbed back upstairs, he couldn't help but feel that something had shifted. Emily wasn't just a stranger anymore. She was a reminder of the person he used to be, and the person he still wanted to become. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft, golden hues across the room. Michael stirred awake, blinking against the light, as he reached for his phone on the nightstand. 7:32 a.m. He groaned and sat up, running a hand through his tousled hair. The house was unusually quiet, too quiet. He pulled on a t-shirt and made his way downstairs, the cool hardwood floor against his feet grounding him as he descended. The faint aroma of something warm and savory wafted through the air, catching him off guard. He stopped midway, his brows furrowing in confusion. As he entered the kitchen, the sight before him brought him to a halt. The kitchen, which he had left in a state of chaos, mail scattered on the counter, a few dishes in the sink, was spotless. The counters gleamed, the sink was empty, and even the small stack of unopened packages near the pantry had been neatly arranged. On the kitchen island sat a plate of scrambled eggs and toast, accompanied by a steaming cup of coffee. Next to the plate was a folded piece of paper, its edges slightly crumpled, as though it had been held tightly before being set down. Michael scanned the room, his eyes darting to the living room, but it was empty. Emily was nowhere to be found. He approached the island cautiously, as if the scene might vanish the moment he got too close. Picking up the note, he unfolded it with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The handwriting was neat but shaky, each word carefully written as though she'd taken great effort to get it just right. Michael, I don't know how to thank you for what you did for me. No one has shown me kindness like that in a long time, and I'll never forget it. You didn't have to stop last night, but you did, and because of that, I had a roof over my head and a warm place to sleep. That means more to me than I can put into words. I don't want to overstay my welcome or take advantage of your kindness. I know people like me don't belong in places like this, and I don't want to make things harder for you. I hope one day I can pay this forward, the way you did for me. Thank you for reminding me that not everyone has given up on people like me. Emily. Michael read the note twice, the words sinking in slowly. He set it down, his gaze drifting to the plate of food. It wasn't much, just eggs and toast, but the gesture felt monumental. She could have taken anything she wanted. His wallet had been on the kitchen counter. His car keys, his watch, anything of value, all within easy reach. But instead she had chosen to clean, to cook, to leave a heartfelt note and walk away without asking for anything more. He exhaled deeply, his chest tightening as a strange mix of emotions washed over him. Loss. That was the first and strongest feeling that hit him. He hadn't expected it, hadn't realized how much he'd already begun to care about Emily's presence in his home. The house, always so still and empty, had felt different with her in it. And now, she was gone. Michael sank onto one of the stools at the island, staring down at the plate of food she had left behind. His appetite was non-existent, but he picked up the fork anyway, eating slowly, almost absently. Each bite felt like a small piece of her lingering in the room, a reminder of the girl who had slept on his couch and shared pieces of her pain in the glow of a rainy night. As he sat there, questions began to swirl in his mind. Why hadn't she stayed? Why hadn't she asked for more help? He had met plenty of people in his life who would have taken advantage of a situation like this, who wouldn't have hesitated to take what they could and disappear. But Emily wasn't like that. The thought unsettled him more than he wanted to admit. He had been so sure that his offer to help was transactional, a one-night gesture of kindness to ease his own conscience. He hadn't expected it to feel so personal. Michael stood abruptly, pacing the kitchen as his mind raced. He couldn't just let her vanish, not without knowing where she had gone or if she was safe. Pulling out his phone, he scrolled through his contacts, unsure of who to call or what to say. He paused, his thumb hovering over a name. Detective Alan Grayson, an old friend from his college days, now working in law enforcement. Michael hesitated, his thumb lingering over the screen. Was this overstepping? Emily had clearly chosen to leave, and he had no right to interfere. But the image of her standing by the window last night, tears streaming down her face, wouldn't leave him. He set the phone down, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I just need to know you're okay, he muttered to himself. The sunlight streaming through the window felt too bright, too cheery for the storm of emotions brewing inside him. Michael's life had been built on control, controlling his environment, his business, his relationships. But now, with Emily, he felt like he was grasping at something intangible, something he didn't fully understand. Taking a deep breath, he picked up the note again, his fingers brushing the paper's edges. He read the final line once more. Thank you for reminding me that not everyone has given up on people like me." Michael set the note down gently, his resolve hardening. He didn't know where this road would lead, but one thing was clear: he couldn't simply let her disappear. Emily had entered his life like a whisper, but her presence was already echoing loudly in his heart. Michael couldn't stop thinking about Emily. Days passed, but her note remained on the kitchen counter, untouched, as if moving it would erase her presence entirely. Each time he walked past it, he felt a pang of guilt and something deeper, something harder to name. He had told himself it was just one night, a simple act of kindness that wouldn't leave a lasting impact. Yet here he was, unable to focus on work or even enjoy the quiet luxury of his home. The silence, once a comfort, now felt suffocating. Finally, he gave in. Armed with nothing but a vague description and the memory of her trembling figure under the rain, Michael began to search. He drove through the streets of New York, scanning sidewalks and alleys, stopping at shelters and soup kitchens, asking anyone who would listen if they'd seen a girl matching Emily's description. Most people shrugged or shook their heads. A few offered vague suggestions: try the park, the subway stations, but none of them led to Emily. The city that Michael once viewed as his playground now felt like an endless maze, each corner leading him further from the answers he sought. But he couldn't bring himself to stop. He told himself it was about closure, about making sure she was safe so he could move on. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. Emily had stirred something in him, something he hadn't felt in years, a need to connect, to care. It was on the 5th day, just as he was beginning to lose hope, that he found her. Michael had stopped at a small diner on the outskirts of the city, more out of exhaustion than any real expectation of finding her there. The place was unremarkable: faded vinyl booths, flickering fluorescent lights, the smell of grease hanging in the air. He slid into a booth and ordered a coffee, rubbing his temples as he tried to decide his next move. Then he saw her. She was behind the counter, her hair tied back in a messy ponytail, wearing an oversized apron that hung awkwardly on her slight frame. She was carrying a tray of dishes, her movements careful but efficient, her expression focused. Michael froze, his heart pounding in his chest. It was her, there was no doubt about it. But she looked different. Stronger somehow, more determined. He stood, his legs unsteady, and approached the counter. Emily didn't notice him at first, too absorbed in her task. "Emily," he said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. She turned, her eyes widening in shock. For a moment, neither of them spoke. "Michael," she finally said, her voice laced with both surprise and apprehension. "What are you doing here?" "I've been looking for you," he admitted, his voice earnest. "Are you okay?" Emily's gaze flickered to the other customers, then back to him. "I'm fine," she said quickly. "I'm working." Michael took in the scene around them, the humble diner, the tired faces of the other employees, and something inside him twisted. "Can we talk?" he asked, gesturing toward a quieter corner of the diner. Emily hesitated but eventually nodded. She handed off her tray to a coworker and followed him to an empty booth. The silence between them was heavy as they sat across from each other. Michael studied her face, noting the faint shadows under her eyes and the way her hands fidgeted in her lap. "Why did you leave?" he asked finally. Emily sighed, her shoulders sagging. "I didn't belong there, Michael. Your world and mine, they're too different." "You didn't even give me a chance to help you," he said, his frustration evident. "You did help me," she countered. "You gave me a place to sleep, a meal, and more kindness than I deserved. But I couldn't stay. I don't want to be someone's charity case." Michael frowned, her words hitting harder than he expected. "It wasn't charity. I wanted to help because I care." Emily shook her head, a small, bitter smile playing on her lips. "You don't even know me." "Maybe not," he admitted. "But I know enough to see that you're stronger than you think. You didn't take anything from my house, Emily. You could have, but you didn't. That says more about you than you realize." Her expression softened, and for a moment she looked away, her fingers tracing the edge of the table. "I don't want to rely on anyone else," she said quietly. "I need to prove to myself that I can do this on my own." Michael leaned forward, his voice firm but gentle. "There's nothing wrong with accepting help when you need it. It doesn't make you weak. It makes you human." Emily looked at him, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and doubt. "Why do you care so much?" He hesitated, searching for the right words. "Because I've been where you are. I know what it feels like to have nothing, to think no one cares. But someone cared enough to help me, and it changed my life. Maybe I just want to do the same for you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Emily let out a soft sigh. "I've been working here for a week," she said. "The pay isn't much, but it's honest. And it's a start." Michael's lips quirked into a small smile. "It is. But you don't have to do it alone." Emily didn't respond right away. She looked down at her hands, her expression conflicted. Finally, she nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Okay," she said softly. Maybe I'll let you help. But only if I can pay you back someday." Michael chuckled, the tension between them easing slightly. "Deal." As they sat there, the hum of the diner around them fading into the background, Michael couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. He had found her. And more importantly, she had found the strength to keep going. For the first time in years, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. The diner was quiet when Michael returned the next morning. The usual clatter of dishes and hum of conversation was subdued, the early hour casting a calm over the space. Emily was behind the counter again, balancing a tray with practiced ease. She noticed him almost immediately, her eyes narrowing in mock suspicion as he approached. "You're back," she said, setting the tray down and crossing her arms. Michael shrugged, a small grin tugging at his lips. "I figured we weren't done talking." Emily sighed, but there was a faint hint of amusement in her expression. "I'm guessing you're not here for the coffee." "Not exactly," he admitted, sliding into a booth near the corner. "When you're done, sit with me for a minute." She hesitated, glancing at her coworker, who waved her off with a knowing smirk. Reluctantly, Emily untied her apron and joined him. "All right," she said, leaning back against the booth. "What's this about?" Michael clasped his hands together, his expression turning serious. "I want to offer you a job." Emily blinked, clearly caught off guard. "A job? Doing what?" "Being my assistant," he said simply. "You'd work with me at my company. I'll teach you everything you need to know." Her brows furrowed, and she shook her head. "I don't know anything about business, Michael. I'd be useless." "That's not true," he countered. "You're resourceful, smart, and driven. I've seen it. All you need is a chance." Emily looked down at her hands, her fingers fidgeting nervously. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." Michael leaned forward, his voice steady but earnest. "Because someone once gave me a chance when I didn't deserve it. And because I believe in you, even if you don't believe in yourself yet." Her eyes glistened, and she quickly looked away, trying to mask the emotion welling up inside her. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "You won't be," Michael assured her. "This isn't charity, Emily. It's an opportunity. And if you take it, I promise you won't regret it." The air between them was heavy with unspoken emotion. Emily looked up, her gaze locking with his. For the first time, she saw not just a wealthy stranger, but someone who genuinely cared about her future. "Okay," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'll try." Michael smiled, relief washing over him. "That's all I ask." The first few weeks were a whirlwind. Emily moved into a modest apartment near Michael's office, which he helped her arrange, though she insisted on paying him back for the deposit. She started working as his assistant, learning the ins and outs of the business world with a determination that impressed even Michael. At first, it was overwhelming. The pace of the office, the jargon, the constant stream of emails and phone calls. It was unlike anything Emily had ever experienced. But Michael was patient, guiding her through each task and never making her feel inadequate. One evening, as they worked late on a presentation, Michael leaned back in his chair and stretched, letting out a groan. "You're picking this up faster than I expected," he said, glancing at Emily. She looked up from her notepad, where she'd been furiously scribbling notes. "Really?" "Really," he said with a grin. "You're a quick learner. I'm impressed." Emily smiled, a small flush rising to her cheeks. "Thanks. I'm just trying not to mess up." "You won't," Michael said firmly. "And even if you do, that's part of the process. Everyone makes mistakes." She nodded, her confidence growing ever so slightly. As they packed up for the night, Michael noticed a small notebook fall from Emily's bag. He bent down to pick it up, intending to hand it back, but the page it landed on caught his eye. It was a sketch, a rough but detailed drawing of the city skyline at sunset, the buildings bathed in soft, golden light. The lines were fluid and expressive, capturing the essence of the scene with remarkable clarity. "Did you draw this?" he asked, holding up the notebook. Emily froze, her eyes widening. "Oh, that's nothing. Just something I do when I'm bored." "Nothing?" Michael repeated, his tone incredulous. "Emily, this is amazing. You have real talent." She shrugged, clearly embarrassed. "It's just a hobby. I used to draw a lot when I was younger, but it's not like it's useful or anything." Michael frowned, closing the notebook gently. Don't sell yourself short. This is more than just a hobby. Have you ever thought about pursuing it seriously? Emily shook her head. I wouldn't even know where to start. And besides, I have enough on my plate right now. Michael studied her for a moment, a thoughtful expression on his face. Well, if you ever change your mind, let me know. I think the world could use more of what's in here. He tapped the notebook lightly before handing it back. Emily took it, her fingers brushing against his for a brief moment. Thanks, she said softly. That night, as she sat in her small apartment, Emily flipped through the pages of her sketchbook. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to wonder what might be possible if she truly embraced her talent. Meanwhile, Michael couldn't stop thinking about her drawings. The way she captured light, movement, and emotion in just a few strokes, it was extraordinary. He made a mental note to keep encouraging her, knowing that her talent deserved to be seen. Over the next few weeks, their bond deepened. They shared late nights at the office, stories about their pasts, and even moments of quiet laughter over shared meals. Michael began to open up about his childhood, about the struggles he'd faced and the people who had helped him along the way. Emily listened intently, realizing for the first time just how much they had in common. They were both survivors, both fighting to carve out a place in a world that had often been unkind. For Michael, watching Emily grow and thrive was more rewarding than he could have imagined. And for Emily, having someone who believed in her, who saw her potential, was a gift she never thought she'd receive. Little did they know, the seeds of something extraordinary had been planted, and the best was yet to come. The night was quiet in Michael's penthouse, the city's distant hum filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Emily sat on the couch, a steaming mug of tea in her hands. She had come a long way in the months since Michael had found her, but tonight, something felt different. Michael joined her, a whiskey glass in his hand. He settled into the armchair across from her, his expression unusually serious. You're quiet, Emily said, tilting her head as she studied him. Michael stared into his glass, swirling the amber liquid slowly. There's something I've been meaning to tell you, he said after a moment. Emily leaned forward slightly, her brow furrowing. What is it? He sighed, the weight of his thoughts pressing down on him. You asked me once why I cared so much. Why I stopped for you that night. She nodded, her curiosity piqued. Michael set his glass down and clasped his hands together. I wasn't always this successful. I grew up in a place where people didn't have much. My mom worked 2 jobs just to keep us afloat after my dad walked out. When I was 18, I started a business, something small, just enough to get by. I thought I could make a better life for us. Emily listened intently, her tea forgotten. I partnered with someone I trusted, Michael continued, his voice tinged with bitterness. Someone who I thought had my back. We built something good, something real. But when things started to take off, they sold me out. Took everything and left me with nothing. Emily's eyes widened. Michael, I had no idea. He nodded, his jaw tightening. It took me years to rebuild. I had to start from scratch, claw my way back up. And I did it, but not without losing a part of myself in the process. I told myself I'd never trust anyone again. He paused, looking at her with a small wry smile. Then you came along. Emily's heart ached at his words. She had seen glimpses of the walls he kept around himself, but now she understood why they were there. I didn't know why I stopped that night, he admitted. Maybe it was because I saw something familiar in you. That fight, that determination. Or maybe I just needed to prove to myself that I could still care about someone. Emily reached out, her hand resting on his. You've done more for me than anyone ever has. You didn't have to, but you did. And I'll never forget that. For a moment, the room was filled with an unspoken understanding between them, a connection forged through shared pain and resilience. Months later, Emily stood in the center of an art gallery, the walls adorned with her sketches and paintings. The room buzzed with conversation as visitors admired her work, their faces alight with wonder and appreciation. Michael stood off to the side, watching her with quiet pride. She was radiant, her confidence shining as she spoke to a small group of admirers. When the idea of a gallery exhibit had first been suggested, Emily had balked. No one's going to care about my art, she had said. But Michael had insisted, using his connections to organize the event and giving her the platform she deserved. Now, as he watched people marvel at her talent, he felt a surge of satisfaction. This was her moment, and she had earned every bit of it. Emily caught his eye across the room and smiled, her gratitude evident in her expression. She excused herself from the group, and made her way to him. "This is incredible," she said, her voice filled with awe. "I still can't believe it's real." Michael chuckled. "Believe it, Emily. You did this. All of it." She shook her head. "I wouldn't be here without you." "Don't sell yourself short," he said, his tone gentle. "The talent was always there. I just helped you see it." Emily hesitated, her eyes glistening with emotion. "Michael, thank you. For everything. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." He smiled, the warmth in his eyes making her chest tighten. "You've changed my life too, Emily. More than you know." A few weeks later, Michael and Emily found themselves standing on a quiet beach, the waves lapping gently at the shore. The sun was setting, casting the sky in hues of orange and pink. "This is beautiful," Emily said, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael nodded, his hands in his pockets as he gazed out at the horizon. "It is." They stood in comfortable silence for a while, the sound of the waves filling the air. "What's next for you?" Michael asked eventually, glancing at her. Emily smiled softly. "I want to keep creating, keep sharing my art with the world. And I want to help others the way you helped me. There are so many people out there who just need someone to believe in them." Michael's chest swelled with pride. "You're going to do amazing things, Emily. I have no doubt about that." She turned to him, her eyes shining. "And what about you? What's next for Michael Turner?" He chuckled, looking down at the sand. "Honestly, I'm still figuring that out. But for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm on the right path." Emily reached out and took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Whatever it is, I know you'll do it with that big heart of yours." Michael smiled, a rare, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Thanks to you, I've finally found it again." As the sun dipped below the horizon, they stood together, the warmth of their connection a stark contrast to the cool evening breeze. In that moment, the past felt like a distant memory, and the future stretched before them, bright and full of promise. It wasn't just the story of a girl finding her way or a man rediscovering his humanity. It was the story of two people who had saved each other in ways neither of them could have imagined. And as the waves continued to wash away the footprints in the sand, one thing was clear: this was only the beginning. As the waves gently kissed the shore and the sun dipped below the horizon, Michael and Emily stood side by side, their lives forever changed by an act of kindness that had blossomed into something extraordinary. This story reminds us all that even the smallest gesture can spark a transformation, not just in others, but in ourselves. Sometimes, helping someone else find their light is the very thing that reknits our own. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with someone who needs a little hope, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Join us for more heartfelt tales that inspire, heal, and remind us of the beauty of the human spirit. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.